In the second phase of the Egyptian gender gap, we have taken up the theoretical lens to translate our previous research of the site and its gender spatial qualities for a more in-depth analysis of our goal of achieving gender equality.
As we understand that the stakeholders are vulnerable and sensitive, it is only fitting that our theorists reflect this in their discourse. For this reason, we have chosen theories of relationships and women's liberation. However, as the male population has had more time and opportunity to get ahead of women, equity is the extra tool that the women need in order to reach equality. For this reason, 2 female theorists have been researched to achieve a balancing act from a theoretical standpoint.
As previously mentioned in our last presentation, veiling was seen as a key concept to explore on our site.
From the city scale, we notice that veiling has a gradual exposure from private to public as the women move from the home to the street, then to the public space.
From an individual experience, only by embodying the act of veiling and unveiling could we understand the significance of the veiling for women.
Engaging with veiled women revealed that veiling has a strong link with their spiritual belief, as it is important for a woman to keep herself pure and protected for her husband and religious requirements. The veil becomes the armor through which she achieves this. For her, being veiled signifies peace, a level of dignity, a lifestyle that she has chosen. The veil is not just for keeping oneself pure, but it is an armor that protects her beauty from the world.
And finally, the understanding of veiling has been explored further at the building scale. The veil is a barrier for women between her personal domain and the public life. In the same way, the skin of the building is a barrier between the intimacy of private life and the exposure of the public realm. We tested this concept through the choice of materials and its layering sequence. By playing with this, emerged the hierarchy of spaces that will veil and unveil her at different levels in the building. The different skins test how close the woman can get to the public realm without becoming fully exposed, allowing her to remain in control of her exposure.
Putting the concept into perspective, we can begin to see the different skins at work on a sample of the building. This clearly expresses the hierarchy of privacies across the layers of the building.
Philosopher Elizabeth Wilson introduced the idea that the male gender is at the forefront of city life. She suggests that as a result, the city has become rigid, routinized, and ordered. As women attempt to find their place within this ordered city structure, they result in deviating from the order created by men, which is perceived as being out of control and as a result are suppressed as a form of protection. Wilson suggests that the city has the possibility to offer a place where women can create their own space. She calls this the second city.
The empty pockets within our site act as the places within the city where women seek to create their space. The site falls within a predominantly linear and ordered structure. By mimicking this action on the site, we begin to exaggerate the existing and proposed linear gestures. We have chosen to reinterpret the places of conversions as potential spaces of liberation. By creating these spaces of liberation on lines of order, we have now intentionally created juxtaposition conditions.
The idea that the second city opens the door for opportunities to be dynamic within pockets that break and redefine the rule of line. New other spaces seem to have emerged between the primary building spaces. Could these spaces, these second cities, speak of her desire to find a place in the city?
In her discourse, Mary McLeod looks at the concept of everyday life and other places. She argues that the main failure of modern movements is that they view the other outside of the everyday life of humans. In the context of gender, women are simply objects outside of their male power and place. She argues that their hunger to promote difference creates an abstract and fragmented architecture that leaves the vulnerable, or the human, outside of the picture.
To explore this concept, we borrowed the film precedent of 678, which tells us the story of women's struggles with society in their everyday life. In the context of the lower class woman, her everyday life has a much longer journey, as she finds herself walking and taking public transport more frequently in order to get to her domestic duties. Because of this lifestyle, she is more vulnerable in encountering frequent sexual harassment.
In the case of the middle-class woman, she finds more support in her larger family, which provides her with more options in moving around the city when going about her everyday life. Though this minimizes her encounter with the public, she will still experience a level of harassment when found alone.
The upper-class woman leads a life with less boundaries, as her independence has allowed her to carry out simple and secure everyday life. However, for the simple reason that she is a woman, she will still experience sexual harassment when she tries to find her place in the public domain.
It was important to acknowledge the everyday life of a woman in the city so that we can grasp the essence of their needs. This allows us to create a system that will carry her through a process of healing, empowerment, and reclaiming, and so creating a platform for her to re-enter into the city.
Our overall goal of the programme is to achieve gender equality and to align with the existing movements. However, in order to get to that point, we need to understand the importance of building smaller relationships that will aid in that larger movement. According to Bakhtin, this can only be done by acknowledging that the other is needed for one to exist or have meaning.
In the context of our building's location and form, 3 types of relationships have surfaced. In the housing versus the street, we found that these two have an opposing relationship that creates a dead space in between. This enhances the importance for the private space to remain private. By creating this dead space, the characteristic of the skin becomes essential to inform the relationship.
In the community centre and street, we found that because this is the entrance to the building and potentially a space that women occupy, it was essential for a more controlled type of relationship to occur. Therefore, the characteristics of this part of the building must carry a semi-public function with controlled entry and exit.
In the housing and the community centre, we understand that these 2 programs have a strong relationship to allow for the ease of movement of the women through the building, from their private quarters to the semi-public spaces. The relationship that exists between these 2 is an incredibly open and intimate kind.
In order for the building to function with the relationships it has created, the activities need to carry these relationships forward also. A hierarchy of spaces have been incorporated, such as the housing being the most private and intimate space. Then the transition of hierarchy towards the centre of the building in the community hub, where a more public and exposed experience occurs. This layout mimics our original intention of creating a system that will take the woman from a healing process to an empowering process, and finally to reclaim her space or place.
By arranging these activities in a hierarchy of privacies, we can start to explore what relationship they have with each other to create their own space in between.
To test relationships between the activities, we have chosen 3 different scenarios to explore the type of space they create in between.
The first case is where the private space meets a semi-public space. These 2 juxtaposing spatial conditions being situated bedside one another have created the situation of a dead space in between. This dead space is given meaning by allowing the woman to situate herself in a transitional space whilst not being in direct contact with either the public or private conditions.
The second case explores the relationship between the same juxtaposing spaces. However, because the in-between space is found next to the street, a third space has been introduced into the relationship. Therefore, the juxtaposing conditions demand a space in between that needs a language that communicates with all 3 environments.
The final scenario, we have chosen to explore the relationship between the public and semi-private space. Here we learn that the in-between space should be dynamic with boundaries. This type of relationship allows the woman to adapt to the public life at her own pace and rules.
Materiality and programs play a crucial role in the building as it informs the spatial presence. Locally sourced materials such as stone gabions, wood mashrabia, and mud bricks are considered for the structural and facade components to sensitively situate itself within the existing context.
So here we have just gone back to the building scale and begun to apply skins that create relationships between programs and the street, but also between the programs themselves. Near the street, we explore a transparent material, but at the core of the building, where privacy is needed, a solid material is used.
So here again, we have zoomed in at the mesoscale to explore how the intentions of private and public environments can be achieved by the skins we choose for those spaces.
Here we tested how the different hierarchy of privacy spaces are inhibited in relation to those skins. At the semi-public level, the woman is able to remain within the protection of the building through a skin that allows her to engage with the public, but at the same time have a level of protection and surveillance. She can easily look out, but the public can easily look in.
The function of the skin found within these private spaces allow for the woman to always feel 100% safe and protected within her personal space. So here we can see that the environment outside of the solid skin does not affect or intrude into her space at all.
As these spaces are neither public or private, the choice of skin for this function achieves a blurred view of the streetscape or the internal building.
In the context of the environment, we have only just begun to explore the building's response to environmental issues. We recognise that deeper environmental explorations can now begin to take place.